Hey, and welcome to episode 141. Today's episode, I'm sitting down with Sara and Ian Curtis from C Squared Games to talk about their brand new project, Iberia, Kings and Emirs. If you love deep strategy, rich historical themes, civilization building, and games that keep you on your toes from the first turn to the very last, who's going to win? You just kicked me out of the game. Well, this one is definitely for you. Iberia is heading to Kickstarter soon, and we are diving into where the idea came from, how the game takes shape at the table, and what makes it stand out in a crowded world of strategy board games. Sara and Ian share their story behind the design, the highs and lows of the process, and give us a sneak peek at what players can look forward to when Iberia, King of Emirs, finally goes live. Sara, Ian, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. We're super excited to be here.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. So Sara, I met you in person at Gen Con. Ian, This is the first time we're meeting, quotation marks. So I'm really excited to talk to both of you. I don't normally do this. It's my show. I want to ask you a question because this is my favorite story. I want you to tell everyone, and you've been open about it, but I really want you to share this. Sara, why don't you tell everyone how y'all got the idea for this game originally? This is amazing. I love this story.
Yeah, so we have been to Spain now 3 times. So we went first on our honeymoon in 2009, and then we went for our 10-year anniversary in 2018, and then we took Ian's family with us in 2022, and we went back. And so while we were traveling through Spain, Ian in particular was reading a book called The Ornament of the World. And so that book really focuses on this time period in particular, the 11th to 13th century Iberian Peninsula. And so it's delving into the different Christian, Jewish, and Muslim faiths and the inner workings of those faiths. And so while reading the book, Ian came home, we came home from our trip and he's like, we could make a game out of this. Let's and all of a sudden the next thing I know, Ian's got a whole bunch of like old maps up on his computer. He's integrating them together. We've got the cardboard out with the printed white paper on it, and we're pulling pieces from old games. I think we used Terraforming Mars at one point, the pieces from that.
That's great.
And, here, we just start trying to play out, how would you say, the inner workings of the faith and politics of the time on a board game. And it was like, we can bring this to the table.
I think that my favorite thing about this story is, and I think we all know this, everyone knows this already, but inspiration can come from anywhere. Like, who would have thought? Let's go on a honeymoon. We had such a great time. Let's go back 10 years later. Let's make a board game. Why not? Right? That is just incredible to me. And talking to so many designers, it's like, guys, your inspiration can come from anywhere, not just the shower.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, Ian, question for you. How long were you into the hobby? How long were you and Sara into the hobby? Were you both gamers before you got married? Did you drag her kicking and screaming? I don't think that's probably true, but it might be.
This is a great story. Yeah, this is a great story, actually.
This is better stories. So I was a video gamer as a kid growing up, and I love strategy video games. Right, that was always my go-to. This was the Civilization, the Total Wars, the whatever grand strategy video games. But the caveat of those is you're alone in a room. All on your own, right? While you take over the world or whatever. And I like people. And it's hard to balance those two together. And yet, when I started dating Sara, she invited me over to a board game night with her friends one night. And, we were early dating. And so...
Okay. Yeah.
And my response in my head, of course I didn't vocalize this at the time, was, are you kidding me? What a bunch of nerds. Oh my God. Who does this? On the phone though, I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, I'll be there, sweetheart. Right. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah.
Because video games are cool, right?
Yeah.
But board gaming is, I get it.
So we showed up, she introduced me to Catan, and that started the long passion of it. So that was 16 years ago. But from the design side, I really grew a big passion for it probably 5 years ago now or so. And for me, it's very intellectual. What I love about it is the simulative nature of games and what I call the strategic empathy that you gain from playing a game, which is when a game is simulative, you gain empathy for a targeted person or a targeted archetype of person.
Yes, of course.
And so you are responding to the incentives that they would respond to or did respond to or might respond to. And you intuitively just start thinking like that person would have because you're responding to incentives. And that's really what I love about games. And that's what brought me to the Iberia concept was when we were there, reading the history, understanding how complex it was, how far more nuanced it was than what people generally consider the reconquest of Spain. Right. And I was like, wait a minute, people are like, they're getting the wrong story. Like this is not the true story of the reconquest of Spain or of the Moors in Spain and kind of the cliche kind of histories that we've been told growing up. It's far more interesting. And I immediately wanted people to respond to that incentive and step in those shoes.
So you're reading this book, you're on this trip with you, you're celebrating an anniversary, you've got your family with you, you're experiencing all that Spain has to offer, completely immersed in this, right? What made you think I need to make a board game? Because you could have done so many things, right? So why specifically a board game?
Yeah, for me, two things. One is I kind of think in systems, the structures of what are people responding to in a moment or in a situation. And that's just intuitively how I engage in a conversation or something.
Yeah.
I want to know why people did things. I want to know the context behind what they did in that moment and so forth. And so games are a system that you get to create and people respond to that system. So I intuitively think that way. And secondly, I'm a visual person. So all this to say is I hate writing long articles. Not like,
yep. Okay, I get that.
I'm working on writing one right now, and it's just like, oh my God, I just want to put it on a PowerPoint and like draw it out on the whiteboard here and like add colors and arrows and so I just like naturally just think like a board, like about a game and about how things are interacting. What are the different levers of kind of that people have at their at their disposal. Thank you. In the moment. And so that's it's hard to describe, but that's it.
I love that. Sarah, when he pitched this to you, so I'm envisioning you thinking one of two things, right? But no, so what were you thinking when he pitched the idea of let's make a board game? Like,
well, I guess it's kind of twofold. I mean, there's obviously the you made fun of me for being into board games, and now like look at you. You're now you're the one of us that's actually making games.
Right.
She never brings that up. Full disclosure, she brings that up quite often.
Well, I don't think you brought that up at Gen Con. Honestly, I don't think so.
I
don't think it.
No, I might not have.
All right.
So you're safe when you're away. She's
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
But actually, I would say that. So this is actually our second design, and so actually, Ian back in 2020 had started working on a much heavier game that we are revising at the moment, but it is a heavy game.
Okay.
And that one is about simulating out the next 100 years of geopolitics. Simple, easy topic, right? So. But
I love that.
Yeah, a lot of people love the concept of this. Yeah. Like, we have to get this game out there. And so that was actually kind of on hold at the time when this Iberia concept came up because there was a publisher that was looking at it.
Okay.
And so Ian started working on this Iberia game, and on my end, I actually saw it as an opportunity to like learn a lot more about the publishing side of the game, because of this game Balance of Power, the original game that we're working on, it's just like I said, it's a heavier game. It requires more people to play. We're talking mold fees. We're talking all sorts of different things. And so this was like a gateway game into the industry of like, how do we learn about the industry? How do we build? How do we learn how to play test more effectively? How do we go about what, I don't know how to get a manufacturer. Well, I didn't. At the time, I didn't know how to get a manufacturer. I know how to get a manufacturer now, How do we do things like building email lists and so this was like a really great learning tool because it's only 4 players. And so we can get people to the table a lot easier, or it's a simpler thing to do. And so we actually made the decision to put Balance of Powers totally on hold, move forward with this game as an opportunity to learn. And we love the game. It's a great game. And then we are going to circle back. And then actually now that we're launching and producing Iberia, Balance of Powers has now re-entered the table. And that's what all of our creative discussions are about now, is Balance of Powers. And we can make better decisions about the game because now that I know things about like manufacturing, I can be like, love the idea, Ian. That is going to cost us a lot of money. So how can we rethink this? So we can approach the game or we can approach our future projects now more effectively, I would say. Right. So I was actually totally all in.
That's great. I love it. So one of the things that I think takes me, surprises me, impresses me about Iberia, right? So I got to play it with you at Gen Con at 3 players. I've played it 2 players with my wife. I got to play it 4 players. So I've gotten to experience it at all of its player counts. The one thing that struck me is on its surface, and this is why we don't judge games by their box covers, is that it seems like a really heavy strategy war game. And it is, but it isn't. It's very accessible. How did you achieve that?
I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Sarah because she was critical in this. So I love complex stuff. I love history. Like you look at my bookshelf, it's covered in like big, huge tomes of history and politics and all this sort of stuff. But I have a kid. I like to go to bed at a decent time. I have other things that I like to do with, like with my life and stuff. So like I love huge war games. I love the idea of them even more.
Yes.
But the reality is like, I don't have 8 hours. Like, I don't have that time. Like I've read the book, I've read the rules. I've watched videos of gameplay for like Twilight Imperium and so forth, but like when I go to a con and I sign up and I'm looking to sign, I'm like, maybe I'll do it this con. Maybe this is it. And then it's like, you need a 12-hour block. Like I'm not going to leave my wife for 12 hours, with the kid and other stuff that we're trying to do in the day. So that was like one of the big things was like, how do I get deeply historical, simulative in nature, let you step into a period of time or another reality, but like you can step out and then still like go to bed or turn on a TV show that night. Like, so that was like one of the core things of when I started designing the games. Like they don't have to be historical war games, simulative games don't have to take up your whole day.
But typically they do, and yours doesn't.
So what I guess the way I would put it is, and this is why it's so hard for me to describe like the system kind of thing that I think of is like, I think of what are the key decisions in the key storyline that I want people to experience. Therefore, what can I get rid of? And like one of my favorite quotes is Mark Twain. If I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter.
So I'll give you a better one. G.K. Chesterton once wrote, "I'm sorry that I wrote you a 10-page letter. I didn't have time to write you a 1-page letter."
Yeah. Yes. There you go.
Because writing concisely is hard. So I get it.
Right.
I totally get that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So just like so for me, it's a really process of thinking like, okay, what is a simpler way or a quicker way to get that outcome, that experience, that player experience without having to go through all the nitty-gritty details of the logistics of that, process in real life. But we're not trying to simulate that. We're trying to simulate an epic of history, like a 200-year period of history. What can we cut out?
So what was the key element that allowed you to take that concept and make it accessible as it is now? What was key to that for you guys?
I'm going to let him think on this for a minute.
Okay.
I would say one thing from my end is that Ian and I naturally gravitate towards different types of games.
Okay.
And so in designing the game and kind of making it a little bit simpler, not simpler, not simpler, but not as epic in some of these, like we love to play Hegemony, but Hegemony takes forever, right? So,
Yes.
So how do we take like that game and bring it down a little bit? Was for me bringing in some of my own gaming experiences.
Okay.
And bringing in some of the concepts. So I've played, I'd say, more like a wider breadth of games maybe than Ian has. So,
Okay.
you know, I've played some of the more simple tile laying games. I've played some of the big epic games. I've played the ones that are like right in the middle. And so when Ian would bring in some of these more complex concepts, I could provide that secondary piece of information of like, I hear that. And this is kind of what we're going through in our creative discussions with Balance of Powers of like, I hear that. It is a great idea. And like, what is our goal of the game? Is our goal of the game to be an epic, or is the goal of the game to be an accessible game that we can play in 2 hours? And so if the goal is to be accessible in 2 hours, then that either needs to be an expansion that can be purchased by people that want to play the epic. It could be a modified version. So like maybe if you and I are going to play this game and we don't want the epic, then we're going to take this part out, you know? So like maybe like a different type of rule set maybe. But yeah, I would say that we just had a lot of discussions of like, what is our goal? And then let's look at these other games that we've played and how have they achieved that. So just to like jog the idea train.
Right.
Of like, okay, you know, we don't want to copy that game, but like, what have they done? Let's talk about that. Let's play some of those games, see if we can use those as inspirations to keep it within 2 hours, for example. So that was kind of like or also, you know, when Ian would want to bring in a lot of war, I'd be like, we are going to be cutting, you know, we'd be cutting a lot of our market. A lot of people want the war. So we are going to work on an expansion that's going to bring in Almoravids and it is going to bring in Crusades. But that's not the goal of this game. Right. So
I think your game, it's certainly, Iberia is not a war game so much as I think it definitely is an area control game.
Yes.
But you have to have military. One of the things, this is the accessibility of this aspect of the game that really impressed my wife. She was really nervous. She was like, "What are you bringing into my house?" You know, it's like we have a few war games in our collection, mostly for nostalgia. Axis and Allies and Fortress America from the 1980s by Milton Bradley, and we get to play that once a year, just so I can, you know, feel nostalgic. But she really loved this, like, because yes, you're building an army and you are expanding like a war game, but it's more area control, and you've done it in such a way. And I want you to talk about this, that there's no player elimination. Like at no time, well, I guess it's not entirely true, right? If I take out your capital, you might be out of the game, but the game is set up in such a way that that's not
it's
the
hard
point.
To do that.
It is hard to do that. But if I conquer a territory that you've previously conquered, you're not out of the game. So talk to me about the development of that aspect and how you were able to successfully achieve that.
Yeah, man, it's hard for me not to nerd out. Like from the history side,
this is the space to nerd out, Ian. It's okay.
Well, I'll say that's what I love about this period of history that I just found so unique, was that for like 200 years of history, so almost as long as the existence of the United States of America,
right?
The reality for humans living on the Iberian Peninsula was this, where war occurred, it was frequent, but it wasn't based on ideological lines. It was based on political power and access to control of larger regions for political purposes, not for these sort of religious ideological purposes. And furthermore, during this period of history, courts and courtiers were critical for expanding kingdoms and for kings expressing their ability to rule was they would just build a huge court and attract people from all over the world to their court in order to prove their legitimacy to all the people in their kingdom. And so that reality gave me the idea of like, well, war was a common and constant kind of thing between these different kingdoms, but there was so much else going on. There was the culture, there was the kingdom building, the civ building, and so forth. And so it naturally led to a game that allowed for other victory outcomes. Was you don't have to go to war all the time. If you just build a really impressive court, you still gain a lot of legitimacy. It's still worth victory points, in a game sense. And it just made a lot of natural sense, this beautiful period of history.
And we did actually play through the idea of, also I'd say we came to this just also through like play testing as well.
Right.
One of our original designs of the game was that if you were eliminated, which was a little bit easier back at the early stages,
right,
was we don't like player elimination, right?
No.
I mean, that's not something that we like in games. And so we spent hours working on a reinvasion. So like, if Ian were to kick me out of the game, I could flee. I could flee to, let's say, France, for example. I could gain more support from France or from the Pope in France and then reinvade. And through that process, because we wanted to give him a chance to come back into the game, but going through the process, you never really had a chance to win if you got you were reinvading.
Right.
You became like a kingmaker role. You could kind of choose who you're going to let win.
Yeah. And that just didn't play well, I mean, we ended up figuring out like how to make it work, but there just was something I was like, I just am not a fan of this. Also was making the rules a lot more complicated.
Sure.
Which was like that's a whole thing, having the like, okay, what is this thing? And so we thought, okay, well, let's just think differently about this. How do we make it harder to be eliminated? So thus we, with our castles, for example, and with the city walls, for example, now if I take those, if I'm invading your area, I lose additional soldiers.
Right.
And so is it possible? It's possible, but is it a deterrent? It's a huge deterrent.
Huge.
Yeah. And keeping people from doing it. And so I'd say in the last year of testing, it's happened twice.
Yeah, just a couple of times. Yeah.
And even in playing with our Wargamer friends, we took it to Strategicon and had it in the Wargame room. And actually was interesting. They, instead of trying to eliminate players by taking their city, they went the peace route and and
forced peace on
each other so that they could then expand. And it was just like a very interesting. I was wondering if they would take it if they would be my
really
extreme
aggressive.
to try to
One thing that I love, just tooting the fun of the game, is one thing I love is you get generally teenage kids who want to play the game and they see it and they think war game, and they're like, all right, I'm going to build a huge army and I'm going to go forth and conquer. Inevitably, they might trigger end game with a huge kingdom, but they don't win, or they overextend and then somebody comes in from behind and takes a couple regions away from them from the other end. And I just love that, watching that play out in the game. It's people who think they can bring a war game conquering mentality to it almost never win.
I think one of the and I definitely want to hear you talk about this some more. It's about the management of populations, right? Mm-hmm. So in each of your kingdoms, you've got the Christian, Jewish, and Muslim populations. You're managing those, and the level or the amount of population in your kingdom dictates how big your army can be, right? Mm-hmm. So there is the need to expand so that you can build a bigger army, so that you can expand. You also need to expand because you're trying to get more population. Like, talk to me about that core element of population in the game.
Go ahead.
So the reality of the time was it was just incredibly diverse across the peninsula. So kings and emirs of the time were not trying to build kingdoms of a single faith or a single demographic. They had to work with all sorts of faiths and demographics. And so, that was a core part that I wanted the game to include. And then from a mechanic way and from a gameplay experience, I'll go back to the simulative and nuanced history side of it, is it forces people to rethink about these issues, like live in the game. Is many times, we have somebody sit down, they're like, oh, well, I'm a Christian king, so I want to have Christians in my kingdom. And then they, even with maybe some coaching for myself or Sarah of like, well, not necessarily. It depends on what you're trying to do. Yeah, we try to give them, some guidance, and inevitably they run into to your point, to the outcome of like, I can only have so big of an army because my population is only Christian, and I just can't support as large of an army without a broader
audience
population. And so I just love watching that play out. From the mechanic side, then it was like what came up for me was, so essentially you're simulating everybody's tax support, right? And so irregardless of whether they historically actually joined armies and so on and so forth, we can get into the historical discussion there, but either way, they're supporting your kingdom's ability to provide or deploy soldiers. And so you need just as many people from different parts of the economy, from different parts of society, in order to create that threshold for an army.
Yeah. So you've got even though it's prototype based on what I've seen, the player mats are dual layered. So I can only imagine what the final product's going to look like, right? And you've got a cube representing 3 cubes, one for each of the populations, and you're managing those. But also, I'm curious about just the design of the game itself. And you could talk a little bit about this, Sarah, because this is what struck me when I met you at Gen Con, we played the game. There's like the little political, what do you call
track.
it? A track at the very bottom of the board.
Yes.
It's again connected to your population, which I love how everything is about. I feel like this game is less a resource management game than it is a population management game, which really struck me. Talk to me about a little bit about that, how the design came up.
Yeah. So I love how you describe it as like a population management, because it's so true. Not only does the population impact the soldiers like Ian was talking about,
right,
but to the point of the track. So again, like I might be that Christian king, for example, but maybe I have chosen based off of my starting location on the board or whatever it is. Maybe I didn't end up actually pursuing a lot of a larger Christian population. Maybe I ended up getting a stronger Muslim population. And so one of the interesting aspects that we've come across, or that we wanted to tell in the game, and then we've seen from people, is that initially people will be like, but I'm a Christian king, so I need my politics to align with Christianity and getting support from the Pope. Right. And the goal of the game is to think more I'm struggling with the word. Like, you need to be a little bit more versatile. You need to be open to hearing what your population is wanting from you. So in this story arc, maybe I have a dominant Muslim population, or maybe I have a dominant Jewish population. And so those populations want me to support, if I have a dominant Muslim population, they want me to get support from the Almoravids down in Morocco. Right. And so they want me as that Christian king to reform my politics to support Islam, And so people always, like, we talk about that when we're at conferences or doing play testing. That is actually an element that draws people in.
Yes.
It totally draws people in. They go, you see the body lean in. Oh, now that's interesting. And I think that's one of the things where someone asked me, like, tell me what's different about your game. And it's like, that is different. That is a different element that people enjoy engaging with, especially not only from of course, I'm conquering those different lands and those populations are joining my kingdoms and they're going up and down. And I might have to be moving on that track, but also Ian's mentioned the courtiers that I'm playing. And again, those courtiers that are joining your court, the whole goal is to have a diverse court of Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And again, if I'm that Christian king, but maybe I want to play a Muslim courtier because I really want the income that they're going to give me. It's going to put me over that threshold to get more income on my turn, and I'm going to bring him into my court. Well, there's a cost to that, which means I have to reform towards Islam. And so it makes you think a little bit more strategic about your gameplay. Maybe I might play that Muslim courtier that moves me towards Islam, which brings me into the neutrality area of that track that you're talking about, the bottom of the board, which actually works brilliantly because the land I'm going to conquer that turn is going to bring me into neutrality. So you can really, like, the way that you play and think about your game, you can use those things to work well for you.
That was precisely my first reaction when I played the game with you, right? I think I was playing a Christian king and I was like, I gotta be Christian, but I was neutral the whole time. And
Yes.
I really struggled. I think it's why I performed so poorly in that game, because then I learned from it, and then playing it again later and realizing, okay, it's your population. You've got to cater to the people, right?
Right.
You've got to manage that accordingly. There was a moment, in a playtest at 4 players where I intentionally played a courtier that dropped my influence on the political track towards center, away from Christianity, and one of the players was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "It's fine. I'll play another card and it'll bring it right back up or whatever." But
Right.
yeah. So the courtiers, did you always know that they would be represented in the game by a deck of cards? Was that an easy design aspect for you, or was there a process?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The answer is yes. It was always cards, and the reason I would say, mechanically speaking, is because cards are the best way to create rule injections or quick, new, rule breakers. I have a card, right? Is always the wait. Why could you do that? I have a card, right? That's the line. And so that always made sense to me. Furthermore, in the sense of you're attracting courtiers to your court, so it's not necessarily deck building. It's more what
tableau building.
Yeah, tableau building, perhaps, because you're building the characteristics of your court as you go. But I always wanted the courtiers because I said the history. But once you read some of the characters, the backgrounds of some of these courtiers, it's just incredible. The characters that lived at this time, it's like Paris of the 19th century or Vienna of the 18th century and so forth, of these critical cities or geographies that house just some of the greatest minds of the world for a period of time, where they all get to gather and meet and have coffee and so forth. That was Iberia in the Middle Ages, and so there's just these characters from Moses of Leon who invented the concept of a golem. Like when we talk about rock golems, that's Moses of Leon. He was of this time.
Al-Zaharwi, he actually invented quite a few of the medical tools that we still use today.
Potentially was the first to find male and female plants as well, long before Mendel. The first map of the world was written or drawn from somebody from this time. It's so on, it just goes on and on. And so there's just so many fascinating characters of, like, can you imagine sitting down, and drinking tea with this guy? Like, what a crazy story he'd have to share, and stuff. So they had to be part of the game. And yeah, to your question, the cards made the most sense. What became interesting then was, how do we show their political influence? And that came to the reform, how they force you towards reform, because whether regardless of your stance, if you're having them join your court, the population is going to perceive you differently. So it forces a reform on you. That was kind of a cool thing that came out from the whole design process.
So I keep harping on this, and I don't know if this is the focus of the game. If you intended this to be the focus of the game, it's that population management again.
Yeah,
because cards, and through my experience of playtesting, I would play cards, and it would adjust where I was on the political track. So in order to complement or enhance that adjustment, I would then have to expand to a province that would increase that population that's favored by those courtiers. So everything seems to be about population.
Yeah.
Right? Every decision you make, down to the card you play, the building you build, right? Because is it the castle? One of them that lets you draw more cards, right?
The
palace, right? And we're all like, I wish I had more palaces because I need more cards.
Which we have a new way. We're going to be adding a way to get an additional card.
Okay.
In the game.
Yeah, from other means.
Well, that's good news.
Yeah. So yeah, on the top of the player board, when you're taking your projects and building your abilities, at the top of the board, there's that political reform.
Right.
And so actually in our final version, the political reform, and the version you have right now, you can go up to 3 different steps. It costs 1, and then 2. And the final version is going to be, it's only going to cost you 111. But in that last step, when you take that big reform, you will be able to gain a courtier of the faith.
Or the politics.
Of the politics, and where you land. So, for example, if I take that for reform and I land in neutrality, then I get to look at the courtier deck and take the first neutral courtier that I find. So it's a way to incentivize people to maybe take some more of those big reforms, as well as providing another opportunity to get more courtiers.
Yes, we want more cards. We want more cards.
Exactly.
The population management, I love how you're talking about that. I always say that the game is about the people of the peninsula, is what I always say.
Yes.
And that's what politics is, right? As politics is understanding and responding to the people of whatever territory you are leading or trying, whatever, governing. And so the way I always, like the way I've put it recently, and I think a blog that we put out on our page was, that's kind of one of the issues that I take with war games, like the traditional war game is we always talk about battles. Like when we're reading history, we always talk about the famous Battle of Hastings, the this, the that, the but like that's like picking up one headline in tens, hundreds of years of history. The real story is what happens behind the headline, right? And that's the population, right? Yeah. That's what happens with the people. Right. I mean, just look at the majority of wars that we've experienced in our lifetime. The war or the battle occurs, but the real story is about winning the hearts and minds. It's about engaging the people, the political process of, completing the victory or whatever, however you want to put it. It's far more complex than the battle. And for whatever reason, our histories lean towards the battle or that one famous person as, the piece that you're supposed to walk away from. But it's really that battle or that person was really just responding to a whole system of incentives that created that one battle that led to that one person rising to power and making decisions that were based on incentives that they faced.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted people to experience, was like, what are people experiencing and what are the population incentives that lead leaders to make decisions versus let's just go to war and win the battle and then
I win.
Game over. Because that's not how you win. The winning the battle is not the whole thing.
Right. Well, you've definitely succeeded in that. So, Sarah, we got to talk about, I've been completely ignoring a whole aspect of this game, and we should talk about it. So there's two ways to win, right? Based on player count, a certain number of provinces in the peninsula you need to have conquered, or build 2 wonders. And we've not talked about wonders at all.
Yes.
So talk to me about the wonders. How do they fit in the game? And then Ian, maybe you can contextualize historically the choice of the wonders, however you guys want to tackle that. But we should talk about it.
Yeah, totally. So the wonders have actually always existed in the game.
Okay.
They were always a mechanism to trigger game end. Now they have evolved over time regarding the benefits that you can get when you build that wonder. We've tried somewhat to keep to history of like what they can give you, for example. But the wonders are really interesting to watch people when they pick up the game to play. Either people go for the wonders or they don't. And it's really interesting to watch a first play of the game, because I would say frequently people go for territory expansion.
Sure.
And there is an aspect absolutely to the game where you have to engage in territory expansion, because to the point we've talked about, if I don't expand my territory, I don't get a bigger army, I don't have places to put all the buildings and the wonders I build. Right. Yeah. And so you have to do that. But people look at the wonders and they think, oh, that's really expensive.
Well, they are expensive.
They are expensive. But to the when you get into things like the courtiers, there's several courtiers that give them at a discount.
Yes.
So if you're buying your palaces, you're getting a higher probability of making them cheaper for yourself. But what's really interesting for us in watching people play is that people that get at least one wonder have a much better chance at winning the game, because it brings in 4 victory points, which is one of the highest things that you can get victory point wise, other than your region with a city in it. That also can give you 4 victory points. But we've done some things with the wonders to where there's a couple new wonders actually that I don't think are in the version that you had, that incentivize you to build out your court. And so if, for example, I have a lot of doctors in my court, then those doctors are worth additional victory points. And so it can kind of provide the goal in having the wonders and adding those like little victory points in there is that if you are playing a game where maybe you have to pivot your strategy, that maybe you're playing in Toledo right in the middle of the map, and you're having a really hard time holding on to territory because people are coming in at you, and it's all not necessarily that they're taking your territory, but they're taking it up faster than you can get to it. So you might have to have a strategy that's more of like the kingdom. I mean, where you're focusing on your wonders, you're focusing on your buildings, you're focusing on your castles, and that's how you're getting your victory points. And so we wanted to provide a way to win without having to have a massive amount of territory. And so it's been pretty cool to, like Ian hinted at earlier, it's been pretty cool to watch where I'm watching a game and I'm doing the mental calculations of victory points. And I'm sitting next to someone, they're like, oh my gosh, I am so not going to win this game. Because aesthetically, like, it doesn't look like they have a lot of points because maybe they only have 3 regions.
Yep.
But they have a wonder, and the wonder that they chose is going to compound victory points on the courtiers they've built. And it's like, if we look at the whole scope of the kingdom that you've created, you actually have a very, I'd say, more dynamic kingdom because you have more interesting buildings.
Sure. Okay.
You have more interesting people, and they either win or they are only like 1 or 2 points off from winning. And then there's always that, like, you see that smile of like, pretty well, and yep. And so it's interesting then, like when I watch people then play like 2 or 3 times, I see people go more for the wonders,
sure,
or at least try to have at least one, and kind of have a combination of the 2 aspects. So that's kind of a neat thing to see. I will say, when Ian and I play the games, we both go for wonders. Mm-hmm. And that does trigger play testers to be like, oh, they're the creators and they're going for wonders, so maybe I should do a wonder too. So that's not always a fair assessment when we're playing the game. Anyway.
So I have another question about wonders, but you just brought up a really good point. In terms of play testing, have you found it more or less helpful when you're play testing when you're an observer or you are an actual player?
So I would say early on, it was really helpful when we were playing, because Ian and I would go into a game. If we knew ahead of time that there was a potential issue with the game, we would go in to play that issue.
Okay.
And so Valencia is one of the regions on the map. And there was an issue early on in the game where if you played in Valencia, it was really hard to win. You got pigeonholed unless you did like a very specific strategy, which is not fun in a way.
Right.
There's a little bit less versatility there. So in playtesting, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to play Valencia, and I'm going to see how it feels. I'm going to see what I think about it. Then the next playtest, Ian would go in and play Valencia, and then we'd compare notes as how we would fix that issue. So early on, I would say it was really helpful because we could play the like game breakers or the break my game type concept. Right. Now it's a lot less helpful because like there's not much for us to like test out in the game, so now when Ian and I play, we will play like if it's a 2-player game, we have a play tester that wants to play, and then we'll play with them. So now it's just really fun to sit back and observe.
Yeah.
Try to be really quiet as to how people engage with the whole thing so that we can see maybe from a rule perspective how we can clarify. If someone asks a question, be like, here's the rule book. Can you find it in the rule book?
Right.
So that then we can watch how they're interpreting the rules.
I was thinking about, you just said you were playing and you bought a wonder and it unintentionally influenced your playtesters to like
totally
alter their approach to the game. So
totally.
I was wondering about that. My follow-up question to Wonders is, so why, and this may be semantics, why call them wonders and not monuments or landmarks? Because the word wonder kind of conjures images of the seven wonders of the ancient world or the seven wonders of the medieval world, and which have some global impact. Where there are buildings, because I found myself playing the game, and I'm like, what are these wonders? I've never even heard of some of these buildings before. And that may be just semantics, but I was wondering how you came about that approach to the wonders, as it were.
Yeah, that's a good question, because that was something, we wrestled with, of like the naming, and like, they're not the seven wonders of the world, you know, and so forth. And it's a totally fair question. I think it creates an interesting conversation, because part of the point of the game was revealing a hidden history. And so I'll come back to that. There are some of the things in the game that are called like the medieval wonders of the world. You know, there've been all these different types of seven wonders of the world that have been recalibrated or whatever, every 100,000 years or whatever it is. 100 or 1,000 years.
right.
But to the point of the hidden history thing is, you know, we call things wonders because we were told to call them wonders. Right? Herodotus chose the seven wonders, if I'm not mistaken, the original seven wonders of the ancient world. Why didn't he choose the Great Wall of China? Because he'd never been there, right? And so we are limited in our reality based on what we've been given to us, right? And so that was one of the things that I leaned into, was by calling it wonders. I thought, the word, I think you said monuments and landmarks and marvels and stuff. I went with wonders, or I chose to go with the wonders, because of this reason of like, well, why not call them wonders? Why not let them be a wonder? They were a wonder to the people at the time. They were a wonder to the people who knew that part of the world. And then secondly, for mechanical game reason, like that's a term that people are used to, you know, that I find, this is an opinion thing, but like in some games where they're like, you know, move your whatever, and then they call a token some random word. It's like, just call it token. Like it's just a token.
So we've gotten to that with like our little cylinders. Like they're not, we call them pawns. And it's like, well, it's not technically like the chess pawn. Okay. So then we like sat online for a long time. We're like, okay, well, what else could we call it? And it's like, you know what? Just call it a pawn. Because if we're getting into like all of these like random words, you know, I mean, we call our coins Maravetti for a historical reason. But if I choose to call our pawn, I don't know, just like a
cylinder, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's like, let's just make it simple. Just make it simple.
So the action economy in the game is really fascinating as well. And I'm thinking about, we'll tie it to the wonders first, but I also just build regular buildings is pretty cool. You can't just purchase a wonder on one turn, right? Like if I recall correctly, one of your actions is to pay a cost, and that's just the first step of 3 to construct a wonder, right?
Right.
Also, the buildings aren't as large, so it's like 2. And what I really enjoy about the buildings, and this is how I explained it to the playtesters in my area when I introduced them to the game, I was like, okay, so you pay the 2 Maravetti or whatever and start a building. You may want to build a palace right now, but next turn when you go to do it, you may find you really need a castle or a temple or whatever it is. And so you don't have to be committed to that structure necessarily. Talk to me a little bit about that phased development. I don't really know what to call it because I haven't seen it in any other game, right? You pay, you get your building, right? In Catan, you pay your resources, you get your settlement. Not so in Iberia. Talk to me a little bit about the mechanics of that.
Do you want to talk about that?
I'll kick off with, the designer historical mentality, whatever. So yes, you know, like you could argue that you're just building the foundation and then you decide what you want to build later. Okay, the foundation of a palace is not the same as the foundation of a mosque, right? So that doesn't hold, and I understand that is not simulative. But what I felt was more important was to get people to experience this delay. Like the reality is in life, right? You want something built, well, you're not going to get it today. So you need to think about what are you going to maybe need down the road and build out that lead time for the completion of it, right? And so I felt that was a more important thing to simulate, of that strategic planning sense of when might, what will I need down the road? How do I start building towards giving myself something in the future, instead of getting into the nitty-gritty details of like, is this a palace that I'm starting versus a castle that I'm starting versus a whatever. And so I wanted people to just get into that mentality of preparing for the future in the game. And then they have the option of deciding what it actually will be. That was kind of where I was at from a initial inception. Was, like I said, I didn't want the game to be like too nitty gritty of details, because like that's not what people need to. What I want people to take away from the game is how much wood and stone you need to build a castle. That's not as important of a learning outcome than understanding the foresight that might be required to build out a kingdom.
Which ties directly right into your simulative experience that you've been talking about.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I'll add that like people really like the aspect, kind of what you had brought up, is that I might want like the palace right now. And that's what I'm thinking about. But then I realize that, for whatever like gameplay reasons, when I go to finish or complete that building, maybe I need something different, because maybe I need that house of worship, because I need to bump up those populations. Circling back to populations, I need to bump that up to bring me into balance with my politics. And so people have always responded very positively to that too, of like, I have some autonomy, I guess maybe might be the right word, but just some flexibility on what my strategy requires at the time.
Yes.
And so
I love that. I think, to your credit, that's one of the coolest things, is like, yes, you're going to invest money in a building, but you're not getting it right now. Right. And that really kind of connects to that simulative experience that you're talking about. And I really enjoy that. Well, Ian and Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. I really love this conversation. You guys have such a great story to tell. Not just how the game came about through a honeymoon, which I love that, but just this game is so worthy. Tell everyone, when is the game launching on Kickstarter, where they can find you on all the socials.
All the things. So it's going to be live on Kickstarter September 30th, and it's going to run for a month. And then we have our Kickstarter page. You can just Google, or you could Google or go to Kickstarter and look up Iberia, Kings and Emirs. But we also have our website that has a lot more information about both our upcoming games, Iberia, and then if they like to delve a little bit more into history, we've started a blog. So for example, people have asked us like, how did Ian come about, like the initial map design? That's been a hot question for us. Let's see here. We have a Discord. We've got our Instagram, C²_games, Facebook. Yeah, we're getting on all the socials.
I love it, guys. So that is September 30th, launching on Kickstarter. Yep. Check that out. As always, please like and subscribe to the channel. And note that, oddly enough, September 30th, that is going to be the last day of our first giveaway of the 6th edition of Catan. So please make sure to go to our YouTube channel, TikTok and Instagram as well, Meeple, and check that out. As always, be kind to each other, and let's play more games.